City Fall, collected in IDW Publishing's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles numbers 22 through 28, is one of the most ambitious TMNT stories ever told. Does that make it perfect? Not necessarily. It definitely has its share of flaws. But I do give IDW a lot of credit for the scope they're going for here. Remember, when City Fall started in May 2013, the series was only in its second year. And yet, authors Tom Waltz and Kevin Eastman, along with editor Bobby Curnow and the rest of the TMNT crew, had such a solid handle on these characters and their world that even at that early juncture, they were able to take a big leap, and in the process turn the Turtles' devoted leader Leonardo to the dark side. This is a comic book transmission. Before we get into City Fall, let's look at issue 21, which serves as a kind of calm before the storm. It's penciled and inked by TMNT co-creator and the voice of Ice Cream Kitty, Kevin Eastman. Eastman came up with the story, which Tom Waltz scripted. The issue sees our heroes go up against a mystery ninja who seems to have their number. TMNT 21 is more or less exactly what you'd expect, and perhaps even hope for if you're familiar with Eastman's work. Something in the vein of a classic Eastman and Laird TMNT issue. It's dark, but not grim. It's got the trademark scratchy texture, and the figures are a little bit blocky in that Eastman sort of way. And as expected, Rhonda Pattison's colors accent things beautifully. It's a nice little interlude and palette cleanser before things start to get heavy. Issue 22 sees the debut of Mateus Santaluco as interior artist. Santaluco is very talented, and as we'll soon see, brings us no shortage of memorable moments. But for yours truly, the success or failure of a TMNT artist largely hinges on the way they draw the turtles themselves. And I've never been a huge fan of how Santaluco draws the boys in green. They're very expressive and emotional, which is a great thing. For evidence, look no further than Raphael's acting in issue 22. But the way Santaluco proportions the bandanas on the turtles' heads has always bothered me. That and the certain puffy, inflatable quality he sometimes brings to their frames. Santaluco turns in a career performance on City Fall, but like the story itself, we can't say it's a flawless performance. The first chapter of City Fall sees Casey Jones abducted by the Foot. Fast forward several pages, and Shredder does something genuinely shocking. He stabs Casey in the stomach in front of the Turtles and Splinter. This moment is as impactful as anything else done in City Fall, and it's one of the first things I think of whenever I talk about it. It's drawn and colored for maximum impact, with the red background packing a hell of a punch when you turn the page. Even the sound effect they use is enough to make you shudder. It's got a wetness to it. Schlip. You can't do that on a Saturday morning cartoon. By this point in the series, Shredder was already well established as a villain, but in City Fall he ups his game and truly earns his status as the Turtles' arch-rival. Not just because of what he does to Leo, but because of the sheer cunning and viciousness he displays in these pages. Here is a man who's trying to conquer an entire city, and destroy the Turtles' family in the process. Moreover, he's flat out stabbing people to get what he wants. What Shredder does to Casey turns out to be part of a ploy to capture Leonardo. By this point, Shredder has enlisted the aid of Kitsune, a shape-shifting witch and one of the Foot Clan's oldest allies. Kitsune brainwashes Leo, turning him against his family and bringing him into the waiting arms of his new master. The subsequent hallucination sequence, which is given several pages in issue 23, looks very familiar, as several familiar names tag in for portions of the artwork. Dan Duncan, Andy Kuhn, Ben Bates, and Eastman. There's also Sophie Campbell, who we'll see plenty more from in future issues. Story-wise, it's not the most logical thing in the world, but it does manage to be powerful. as everything Leo values comes crashing down around him. Subsequently, we get what may very well be the book's dramatic highlight in issue 24. Splinter attempts to bargain with Old Hob for Leo's location. Of course, it's a trap. Splinter and his remaining 3 sons wind up confined in a shipping container with Shredder and a small army of his foot minions. It's here that we get the big reveal. Leonardo has turned against his family. It's an edge-of-your-seat sequence, and your stomach drops when you see all that awaits our heroes. Thus, we're introduced to who the IDW crew would dub behind the scenes as Dark Leo. Years later, Santaluco would say in an interview that Dark Leo ultimately isn't that different from the Leo we know. Quote, "Leo is disciplined, a real soldier if you will. Once you change who he is responding to, you change his relation to the world around him. In essence, he's still the same person, loyal and faithful to his duty as second in command of a ninja clan or army." End quote. My critiques of his artwork notwithstanding, I think that's a great insight from Santaluco. Leonardo's loyalty and his steadfast pursuit of what he thinks is right are arguably the 2 qualities that make him most suited to be team leader. But if you shift where those qualities originate from, you potentially get a very, very different person. But here's my question. Did the IDW team take full advantage of this Dark Leo premise and really milk it as much as they could? In the grand scheme of things, Leo doesn't wind up being under Shredder and Kitsune's control for that long. About 5 issues. That's a long time when you're reading these issues on a month-to-month basis, but in 1 or 2 sittings, not so much. Plus, in that time frame, outside of the initial explosion of his turn, he doesn't really do much. Granted, you don't want to push the envelope too far, but Shredder never pushes Leo to do some terrible thing he'll need to atone for later. He doesn't, say, get into a big fight with one of his brothers, like we saw in the 2008 TMNT movie. Really, the worst thing that happens to Leo while he's under the Foot's control is that he gets confused about his allegiances. I would have liked to have seen the IDW crew do something with a little more punch to it. Still, the story isn't without its redeeming qualities. Leo's turn creates a ripple effect that touches virtually every area of the book. Not only does Splinter make a Faustian deal with Old Hob, but Raph goes on a violent rampage looking for answers, a jealous Karai creates her own mutant henchman, and Casey Jones's father becomes the villainous brute Hun. The sheer scope of Cityfall is massive. So massive, in fact, that one can argue it starts to become a problem. Almost from its inception, IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book was accompanied by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Micro Series, a set of character-based one-shots published periodically to supplement the main book. Naturally, new characters and developments started popping up in those books that began to impact the main series. Whenever something like this would happen, the IDW team would simply include a caption box referencing whichever issue was being alluded to. No harm, no foul. The trouble is that there are so many characters and plot threads converging in Cityfall that it starts to feel like we aren't getting the full story without reading the supplemental material in micro-series. The character of Hun is the most egregious example. In issue 25, Casey's father Arnold Jones is devastated after learning that his son has been stabbed. Then in issue 27 he shows back up as Hun, the massive and muscled leader of the Purple Dragon Street Gang, just in time to have a showdown with Casey in issue 28. Arnold Jones's transformation into Hun and all the circumstances surrounding it, that was all in the Hun-dedicated issue of TMNT Villains micro-series. Mind you, the main series continues to cite the micro-series issues, and if you're reading the IDW collection books, said micro-series issues are included. But not everyone has the fortune of reading this series via those collections. The simple truth is, for better or worse, you need the micro-series issues to see the full tapestry of Cityfall. Casey Jones and April O'Neil's romance comes to a head in issue 25, as they more or less make it official. Their relationship developed quietly over the course of the series. It's not overstated, and there's no over-the-top Shakespearean drama to it. As such, it feels a little more organic and real. Here are two people who naturally gravitated toward one another. Meanwhile, Bebop and Rocksteady, two staples of the 80s cartoon, finally make their IDW debut in Cityfall.
He called us imbecilic buffoons. Yeah, and you thought he didn't like us.
Like Hun, their unveiling is greatly supplemented by their own microseries issue, but they don't feel underdeveloped the way Hun is. By and large, they're exactly as we remember them. Two charmingly bumbling, seemingly indestructible goons who do the bidding of the Foot. And really, would you want it any other way? Just like there's an art to knowing when and how to adapt or update something, there's also an art to knowing when something doesn't need to be changed. My only complaint about their big entrance? The head of Rocksteady's sledgehammer is too small. It barely looks bigger than his fist. If you're going to swing a weapon at somebody, shouldn't it be more damaging and effective than if you just punched them? He's a big dude. Let him have a big hammer. I maintain that not all, but many of the best TMNT stories are, at their core, about family. Such is the case with City Fall. Yes, it is about a supervillain making a massive power grab, brainwashing a mutant turtle in the process, but I also think it's a story about what happens to people when a family becomes broken. Some, like Donatello and Michelangelo, remain steadfast in the face of heartbreak. Others, like Splinter and Raphael, give in to their darker and uglier impulses. Some families, like the Turtles, are fortunate enough to heal and come back stronger. Others, like Casey and Arnold Jones, remain fractured and in fact grow further apart. When you look at it that way, City Fall could just as easily have been called Family Fall. So was this story all that it could have been? No, not really. But does that mean it was bad? No. It's a good crack at a large-scale, high-stakes event comic. And certainly not the book's last crack at it.